Is this Espada's fault? If Dusty Baker was here, would this team be playing well?
This is not Espada's fault at all. And the fact is, we can nitpick little things early in the first game of the season, and whether you use Hader in a non-safe situation or not. But the fact is, the players have to play, and Dusty Baker would be going to the same exact players that we're seeing Joe Espada go to, and he might be going to Abreu even more because of the fact that he had such a belief and stay loyal to his veteran players and the backs of their baseball cards. So I don't think, as much as everybody wants to go at the low-hanging fruit, oh, you got a new manager, it's his first time on the job, he's probably to blame for at least a good portion of why this team isn't playing well. No, it's not playing well because the guys that play aren't playing well. This is not on Joe Espada right now. This is on all the guys that aren't doing their job that we've highlighted throughout this show and since the season started and they started playing bad. This is the back of your bullpen. This is Jose Abreu. This is Alex Bregman. And the list goes, Chas McCormick. The list goes on and on for guys that are underachieving and not performing.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too. I don't think Espada has been perfect.
No.
I think there's some things that I've looked at from Espada that I don't love. There's been some people that have been critical of his lineup construction, which I think is a fair point. I don't necessarily care about batting orders much. I think they're extremely overrated. But some people point to that, and I do think it's fair. And to those people's credit, the stats right now do back up their point. Like, you're high in OPS, you're high in hits, you're below average in runs. So that does back up their point. But your key pieces, like you said, are not performing well. Whenever you have your big free agent signing Josh Hader pitching to an 8.38 ERA and blowing save and blowing save and blowing save, it's not something you can really outmanage, at least from first pitch to last out. Brian Abreu, one of your top guys, is an ERA right around 5. Ryan Presley, 8.31 ERA. You've had the injuries. Fromber still on the IL. Yep. Justin Verlander started the year on the IL. Christian Javier just landed on the IL. And then you've had some key pieces offensively that have been not good. Alex Bregman has been your 3 or 4 hole hitter all year, mostly 4 hole, and he's hitting .213 with a 582 OPS. Chas McCormick, who everybody thought was going to have a really good season after having a good year last year, has been bad up until this series, and he's got at the average up to 262, not awful. Jake Myers, your everyday center fielder, has been not very good offensively to the point where he can't be your everyday outfielder. And then Jose Abreu's literally on pace to nearly double the worst season for a position player in Major League Baseball history. So from first pitch to last pitch, I don't think that Dusty Baker would be doing a whole lot differently than Joe Espada's doing that would lead to a better record. Now, one thing that I would argue for from the Dusty Baker side is Dusty Baker put in Chas McCormick, maybe gets him hot. What is Alex Bregman's favorite food? I don't know, that terrible salsa that he makes, that he changed the name on it because it was doing bad numbers and not selling. Maybe he would bring him some salsa. Like, that's the stuff I wonder what's going on in the clubhouse, because on the field, like, the product has been bad. I don't think it's Joe Espada's fault. But the clubhouse stuff is where Dusty Baker, I thought, was great, where we have no idea what Joe Espada is yet.
No, but the one thing that the caveat I was also going to add that you brought up is that if you take a manager, I don't care if it's Joe Espada, I don't care if it's, whoever your favorite manager of all time is, and say, take a team and on paper going into the regular season, right before your eyes, take the top 3 starters that are going to be your starters in your rotation, that are also going to be above average starters in baseball and in your league, and just basically take them away. And say, deal with it until a time where you can start seeing them come back, and it'll happen over time, but you don't know when. And then couple that with all the shortcomings offensively with guys you were expecting, to at least do what they did the year before or somewhere close to it, and they haven't. I don't think any manager taking over this team to start this season that is forced to deal with those situations are going to have much better results. I just don't.
Would Dusty have this team playing better ball, and how short is the leash for Joe Espada? 1509, maybe it really is Dusty. The team was very comfortable with Dusty, like he was their papa, who would in fact have their backs no matter what happened in the media. The trash can hate, from the Yankees to fans complaining about banana pudding or contributing to start a sub 100 hitting catcher. Oh, okay, that's a lot of stuff there. I don't really know what he said. I do think that Dusty's best strength was his stuff in the clubhouse. Like, on the field, you get lack of production. You're not going to win a whole lot of games. But can you keep up morale? Are you getting, are you handling the psychology part of the game well in the clubhouse? Where that stuff matters a lot. I think
really
that's where Dusty was elite. Like, we look at, I think we overrate game management in baseball, which is really not that hard to do. And there was a few things that we didn't like that Dusty did, and we were very, very critical of that. But the thing that we couldn't see, that's the most important part of managing, being in the clubhouse, getting the most out of your players, keeping the morale, that's where he excelled in. And I don't know. I'm not in the clubhouse, and I haven't heard enough from the clubhouse about how Joe Espada is in there.
No, we talk about culture mattering. We talk about every sports team and how they're trying to build the right culture and all the things the Texans have had to deal with culture, and the Rockets too to some degree with Silas. You look at this and you say, hey, look, Dusty was quirky. I used to always talk about Pawpaw's belly. He had gut feelings and he did things, but the one thing that he did was he knew the hierarchy within the locker room before he even got into it. And when you hear the Verlanders and the Altuves and all the veterans that have been in that clubhouse, they can't stop singing his praises. And if you have them on your side, it's a whole lot easier to manage the entire locker room and to have everybody's morale where it needs to be. Yeah, Yiner was pissed off he wasn't playing more last year, and we went through that. Yeah, Chaz had his episodes too with him, his brother, the media, all those things. But we're not talking about the most important players on your roster, and those guys seem to always be satisfied with Dusty Baker. And to Joe Espada's point, not that he can't get there, but there's a difference from being the guy that gives them the extra infield, that is on the bench, that is always there for them, to suddenly being the captain of the ship and trying to kind of get everybody to feel like, hey, he's in control of everything in here too.
713-780-3776. Mike P. Dusty gets the players to play right. This on the ESPN Houston YouTube. Coaching matters.
Coaching matters less in baseball, I think, than any of the other big threes. I think that coaching matters in the NBA. Coaching matters in football, even on a play-by-play basis. I think in baseball, what's reasonable to say a good manager is responsible for 5 wins a year? Or is that too much?
See, again, I think this stuff is hidden in baseball. Like, we don't see it as much. Like, managing a baseball game, I think, is relatively simple.
Mm-hmm.
There's things that you like, and we always talk about batting. Well, Dusty's hitting, Pena here. He's hitting Jordan here. Espada's hitting Jordan here, Jordan there. I think batting order is extremely overrated. I think what really matters for a baseball manager is clubhouse stuff. So what is a good manager getting you? Like, well, if he's keeping the morale high and he's like keeping the culture, he's keeping the, the chemistry intact, it could be a big difference. It could be the difference between a winning team and a losing team. But from like a strategy, I sound like David Kelly. From a strategic point of view, first pitch to last pitch, I don't think that the best manager versus the worst manager is greater than like 5 games.
Yeah, so then it's more about your communication and psychological skills than it is from day to day, a lot of times in your managerial skills. Know the rules.
It's more psychologist, yeah.
That's what I'm
in
saying.
The clubhouse, yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So it's more psychology and communication, like whether you got a guy scuffling or there's issues with certain players and how you handle that, more so than it is know the rules and know when to, the switches and the things that happen late inning in games that you're going to be dealing with, and then let the players go out and play the game. So could Dusty have made a difference? I really don't think so at this point in the season. Now, if this continues to be bad, then there's probably going to be more and more in where, to your point, you're going to start delving into not just what's happening between the lines and on the lineup card, what's going on behind the scenes, after games, before games, and in travel, to figure out that there's some disconnection.
Yeah, and that's the stuff we don't know about yet. Like, and it's hard to know because we're not in there, and the players aren't going to be talking about it 20-something games in. Hockley Dan, would people act the same towards A.J. Hinch if he was the one to inherit the club from Dusty? I don't think so, because A.J. Hinch has back a baseball card.
He does.
He has the history. He has the history of being a winning manager. Joe Espada doesn't. This is Joe Espada's first year in his entire life as a manager of a baseball club, so he hasn't built up like us giving him the leeway because we don't know how he's going to be as a manager. Hinch at least has a reputation and has a background.
And it's also low-hanging fruit. At this point, when a team gets off to this bad of a start, people are just looking to lash out, and they're looking to point a finger and get the crosshairs. And the easiest thing you can do is say, hey, what's different from last year to this year? Well, you've got a Hall of Fame manager that left, and you've got a first-time manager that's taken over. Must be all his fault.
I believe that Dusty would have this team with more confidence when things are looking bleak. Yes, he had his negatives with his lineups, but there were still lots of injuries last year, and he made it through. Not saying Espada should be fired. I just believe Dusty's experience in baseball gave this team a certain edge that they are missing this year. I don't know if they're like. I'm not going to go as far to say that they're missing the experience. I'm not even going to go as far to say that morale in the clubhouse is bad.
Mm-hmm.
I just know that this team could use good morale in the clubhouse, and that Dusty, that was his strength, was keeping good morale in the clubhouse. But maybe they do have good morale in the clubhouse, and we just don't know it.
Yeah, we don't know.
Because whenever you lose, the easy thing, well, chemistry's bad. Oh, leadership's poor. Oh, the manager's keeping bad morale in the clubhouse. How do you know that? How do you know that? You're saying that because you're losing games. There's times when teams lose games, and the morale's great, and the chemistry's great.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't have the talent. So,
that's where it goes back to. When you have a laundry list of injuries and you've got guys that are underperforming, you don't think Dusty Baker would have made the same moves in terms of calling on the back of the bullpen guys, and probably would have used Hader maybe more because he was always in dire need and loved his lefty. And we were always talking about him having a loogie because he desperately wanted a lefty. If you gave him a toy like Josh Hader, you don't think he's going to use Josh Hader? Do you think he's suddenly going to be what you wanted him to be, listeners, and saying, oh, we only want to use him in safe situations? I don't think so.
I mean, Dusty did have Daly Rayleigh once upon a time.
Who's hurt now?
Let's is he hurt?
Yeah.
I could not have told you that. 50-30 just started listening, but yeah, it's totally Espada's fault. No one is clutch /S, which means sarcasm, which I agree with. I think it's more about execution, injuries than the dugout. It's not to say Espada is like the best manager in baseball, because there's things that he's done that I'm not a huge fan of either. 713-780-3776. Let's go out to the HRMP listener line. Keith, you're in the Hive with the Bees. What's up, Keith?
Hey, guys, love the show. The manager absolutely makes a huge difference. This roster is super talented, but just going to last season, Bruce Bochy, first year with the Rangers, they win the World Series. The previous 10 years with Jeff Bannister and Chris Woodward, the Rangers were awful. They were in the basement of the division. The manager makes a huge difference because Bochy, literally year one, wins the World Series.
Were all those rosters the same there, Keith?
Yeah, I was going to say, suddenly you got Simeon and Seager and all these guys.
Their roster's now one of the best offenses in baseball. 5 years ago, they had a 4A club, and it's all the manager. Now, look, managering, I mean, it matters. No one's saying it doesn't matter, but let's not pretend that Bruce Bochy didn't have a really good roster, and then you look 7 years ago inside the Rangers organization, and they were poor. And the Bannister thing, Bannister won an American League Manager of the Year once upon a time. Bannister led them to the playoffs. So, saying that Bannister never won there is inaccurate.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to say that just quickly off the cuff looking back, but when you really delve into it and the things that we brought up and the fact that as it relates to the Astros situation, I don't think that any manager, no matter what their back of their baseball card looks like, is going to come into this situation
on the back of his baseball card
and say, you're going to start the season without your top three starters. You're also going to have other starters that you don't know when you're going to get them back. And you're going to have all these guys in the lineup, including your starting first baseman, suck or be below what they did a year ago, and that they would do better than Joe Espada.
And why did the Rangers win the World Series last year? Was it Bruce Bochy or was it Adolis Garcia going nuts? Was it Marcus Semien? Was it Corey Seager? Was it,
Carter, the guys they
Jordan
brought up?
Montgomery having a really good postseason? No one's saying that managing doesn't matter. But was managing the trump card of a team that was a wild card and a World Series champion? No. It's good to be optimal all around. It's great to have the great roster and the great manager. And I think Bochy's great. I think Bochy's fantastic. But Bruce Bochy didn't, single-handedly guide that organization to a World Series title.
Their general manager was all in. And once they put Bochy in place, that's when he started to make the moves that led them to go out and get Jordan Montgomery, to get Max Scherzer, to get the guys whenever they needed someone or someone got hurt or they had a spot to fill. They had a plentiful minor league system. They went out and they were in full go for it mode, and it worked out.
Woodward's best players in the final 3-4 years he had the job: Joey Gallo, highest WAR guy in 2021. Lance Lynn was his highest WAR guy in the COVID year in 2020, and then the previous 2 years were Mike Minor. Oof. So if Bruce Bochy was coaching those teams, if Bruce Bochy was managing those 19-21 Texas Rangers, something tells me they'd still probably lose 90-95 games. Yeah, go Cougs.
And Woodward was not?
I don't believe so. Yeah, not that I would know that too. So yeah, he wasn't a U of H guy. 6927. I think these players are just tired. They've been putting up instead of shutting up for 7 years now. It was bound to end at some point. The reason that they're 9 games below 500 isn't because they're tired and battered and bruised from the previous 7 years. I don't believe that. Fundamentally, I do not believe that.
I don't either. I mean, we look at that. Look, that means that Altuve, a guy that's been here through every bit of the 7 years, should be worn out. Instead, he's one of the best hitters in the American League. I mean, you've got guys that are still doing it, and there's not that many left from the entire 7-year run. But if you're going to take the signature player from the 7-year run and tell me if he ain't tired and he ain't dragging and he ain't, just blowing it off or not playing like that, then that's something. Altuve's playing his ass off.
Not only that, but they actually had one of their longest off seasons in a few years because they weren't in the World Series. So they actually got, and there wasn't a WBC, so they actually had one of their longest off seasons.
So what do you think is the leash for Espada?
I think, boy, I just can't see a scenario where he gets fired this year.
Even if they miss the playoffs?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. This year,
like
okay?
season.
I think at the end of the
mid-season,
season,
okay.
you start getting all these players back that you're expecting back. You get the top 3 in your rotation, and then eventually Garcia, McCullers, Urquidy, all those guys. And then and you still can't find a way to get to the playoffs and or get where you wanted to go. Then I could see him going. But I don't think it's fair to him with what we've talked about that he's had to deal with that you can fire him before then. I said fair. It's possible with an owner because any owner can just have a bad day or not like the communication and get rid of
it
anybody.
depends on what Reggie and Jeff tell them.
It would probably also be like they're clashing. That
and or what you said. There might be some stuff behind the scenes we don't know about that's starting to come to a head and players are starting to get ticked off too.
We don't know this to be the case.
No. I'm saying, but it would have to take something where you have to take immediate action because players are very upset or like there's a disconnect between the GM and or the ownership. Other than that, I just can't see him getting fired this season.
I can't either. 0891 Joe gotta go. 4683 the issues with the Astros this season stem from the GM's office, not the managerial's office.
Well, what if the GM's not making any decisions?
Well, I think that's what he means. He's talking more front office as opposed to Dana Brown. I agree with that. I think that it is more front office than the dugout. You go back to like off-season wish lists, 2-3 arms, left-handed bat. They didn't do any of that. They got one big league arm. And whenever you have injuries, the holes and the weaknesses of your team magnify. And we're seeing those. Like, there's a lot wrong with the Astros. 9780, Joe is more straight line than Dusty was. Does that make the guys press?
Say that again?
He's more straight line than Dusty was. Does that make the players press?
We don't know that either, though, do we?
I think it's pretty easy to see that he's more straight line than Dusty. He might not be very straight line, but he's
he
definitely
may not
more
be
straight
bringing
line than
players
Dusty.
pudding, but I don't know that I don't think he's a hard-ass tough guy.
Well, that's not what he said, though. He said that he's more straight line than Dusty, which I think we would all agree on.
Oh, okay. Because Dusty was just that laid back.
I don't think he's like Girardi, though.
No, right. I was going to bring that up later, but that's exactly right. And I think that this guy's been in that he's been in that clubhouse for 7 years, and longer than that. He's been here since AJ. It's not like most of these guys don't know him and know just about everything about him and how he is, his personality, and everything else.
This texture spoiled bad word fan base that barely existed before 2017. I think the Astros are gonna be fine. I think they're gonna figure it out. Lamont says, when is it the managerial's fault though? Which I think is a good question. Like, at what point do we get like we're saying that Espada's not to blame for all of it? I don't think Espada's Tommy Lasorda, Sparky Anderson just yet, but it's hard for me to point to him as the blame. Lamont's asking, when can you do that?
So that's what I was alluding to earlier when we started talking about if you start getting all these guys back from the injured list, and they're all the capable players that we knew them to be, including starting with the top 3 starters, and they're still underperforming, and you start doing things that just you're not pinch hitting at the right spot. And we don't know, again, because the tough part about all of this is we don't know how much is just him and how much he's hearing it, feeling it from above with the Crane gang. But I would say that when you are back to close to full strength, health-wise, and if he is doing things that you want to that we can now question about when he's pinch hitting for players, how long he's leaving pitchers in the game, where he's using his pitchers situationally, things like that, and then I think that's where you can start to evaluate him. And because I can't tell you, well, there might be, if we start hearing things, rumblings in the locker room, you know, or if Crane doesn't like you, obviously with Click, he doesn't like you. If he's not getting along with you, that's something we don't know. We can't put a date or a finger on it. But that would obviously play into it as well.
I mean, if Bregman's hitting 220 and he hits 220 for the entire year, I can't really be like, well, Joe Espada is responsible for that. If Josh Hader has an ERA of 8 all year, I can't be like, well, Joe Espada is responsible for that. If Ryan Presley has an 8 ERA all year, I can't be like, well, Joe Espada is responsible for that. Now, if Chas McCormick hits 220, I'll be like, Joe, bring in some banana pudding. Maybe you'll get them on fire. So to me, it's more players playing well. Now, like manager putting the players in positions to succeed. Like, what does that look like in baseball? Batting order? Like
it's batting order.
But I mean, Bregman's always been a good cleanup hitter until this year. Like, it's too early to start having these conversations.